Thanks for joining me, Ashton.
Great to be here.
I wanted to start just by asking, how did you first start writing about ageism?
Well, if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be mesmerized by the topic of aging, I would have thought you were delusional. I couldn't imagine it being interesting or anything other than depressing. But hindsight being 2020, I realized that I got into it because I was in my mid-50s at the time, and thinking about getting older, and I was apprehensive about it. And I was looking for a new project to write, and my mother-in-law said, why don't you write about something people ask us all the time? She and her husband Bill are booksellers. When are you going to retire? So it started as a project about older people who work, which was nice and safe and bounded. But the reasons why people work are pretty obvious, the reasons that it's good for you. And that wasn't surprising. It wasn't surprising that there were all these really fascinating 80 and 90-year-olds. What astonished me was once I started to do some research, in 5 minutes, how much of what I thought I knew about aging was totally wrong. Starting with the assumption that it was depressing to be old. Older people enjoy better mental health than the young or middle-aged. There's something called the U-curve of happiness, if you Google it, that shows that across cultures, across marital status, across nationalities, people are happiest at the beginnings and the ends of their lives. People are less afraid of dying as they get older. I would have thought, geez, the Grim Reaper is getting closer and closer. That must really be awful to live with every day. That's not how it is. So I just was like, how come nobody knows this stuff? And we don't know it because we live in a culture that drowns out all but the negative about late life. And the reason behind that, to generalize, of course, is that if aging is a problem, they can sell you stuff to fix it. And if aging is disease, they can sell you stuff to cure it. And aging is not a problem, and it's not a disease. It is a natural, powerful, lifelong process that unites us all.
Can you pinpoint a time in our culture when we started, interacting with people of older age in that fashion?
Well, there's a bunch of factors behind the rise of ageism. And ageism, I should say, the definition of ageism is stereotyping and discrimination on the basis of age. We are ageist anytime we make an assumption about what someone is capable of. Too young as well as too old. Ageism affects all ages, on the basis of how old we think they are. When people live in communal settings, in villages, in agricultural societies, obviously all ages are together. And every time you have integration, you have less stereotyping, because then you're dealing with people as individuals, and you see they're all different, and some are capable of, some old guys are good at cutting down trees, and some young guys are, good at typing, whatever. And in the 20th century, partly because people started to live longer, there was more old age, and age began to be characterized as a social issue and problem to be fixed. Social Security came along, which was fantastic because it lifted tremendous numbers of older people out of poverty. It's also when you saw the creation of the senior residence and retirement homes and stuff. And once aging started to be conceived of as a problem, then it began to be characterized negatively. Retirement villages caused segregation, and we live in this consumer culture that, where there's this drive, of course, to buy and consume. And so the youth market, every ad agency in the world is focused on selling to this 18 to 36-year-old demographic, even though older people have much more purchasing power. And the commodification of youth culture in ads, in the movies, in the newspapers, in the media, everywhere, drives this idea that youth is idealized, especially cosmetically, and that we need all to spend. I mean, it's sort of bizarre if you think about it, that we believe, I think most of us, that the big challenge as we live is to adapt to and learn from life as we go through it. And then suddenly, somewhere north of middle age, the objective becomes to put on the brakes and have everything stay the same, which is not possible. As a dumb goal, it's a punitive goal, and why on earth, should it be desirable? Why shouldn't we continue to grow and learn as we go all the way to the end?
It's probably not an easy solution, but how do you reverse this in our culture then and in our society?
Well, I think there's some really positive trends, in particular the growing awareness that diversity is a really good thing, and that we have a more equitable and more interesting culture and life if we have contact with people who are different from us. And one of the things I ask people is, well, what do you think of as criteria for diversity? And people think of race, and people think of sexual orientation, et cetera, and I say, what about age? And there's this pause, and they go, yeah, obviously. So it's intuitively obvious that age should be a criterion for diversity. So I think we have that, in the business world as well, even though age discrimination in the workforce is a huge problem. We know, buckets of research show, that age-diverse teams function better and make better decisions, just like teams with people from different cultures and different races. We bring more to the table. So we had the women's movement, in the 70s that woke people up to the idea that structural discrimination was a problem for women. We had the civil rights movement. We have a long way to go on both those fronts. We haven't had a movement yet that says discrimination on the basis of age is a real problem as well, that cramps the prospects of all of us. I mean, if one discrimination affects everyone, all these isms compound and reinforce each other. They all operate to keep conventional power structures in place. But once we start, once we see one of them at work, it becomes easier to see others of them at work. Ageism is still socially sanctioned because we haven't started to think about it yet, individually and collectively. I mean, people say horrible things about old people. And we say horrible things about ourselves, our own older selves. And that's where the movement begins, is looking at your own attitudes towards your own age and aging. And so I have taken this on as my cause. I wrote a book that was published this spring called This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism, that explains what ageism is and the damage it does personally and collectively. So I hope people will read the book. I hope people will start consciousness raising groups around age bias, which was the tool of the women's movement. And there's one on my website, thischairrocks.com, free downloadable resource called Who Me, Ageist, because we are all ageist. I mean, I think we're also all racist and all sexist. It's really, we grow up, you have to stand somewhere, and there's all these messages that come at us that shape our attitude. In this culture, we're barraged with messages from childhood on. Attitudes towards age start to form in early childhood, just the same time that attitudes about race and gender. And someone said at a recent talk, why don't we teach kids about ageism the same time we teach them about sexism and racism? Why don't we? What a really good idea. Because we're all biased and we have to work against it. So the first step, is to look at why we say, why do we blame forgetting something on a senior moment? Kids forget things too. We don't call that a junior moment.
And since your book came out, you've had a lot of things popping up with the movement. Talk a little bit about some of the activities and things you've been involved with to try and raise awareness about ageism.
It's pretty exciting. I mean, the response, here I am at your fantastic senior center, and there was a conversation this morning that went on for 2 hours of people of all ages who've read my book and who find the ideas really exciting. And that is because we know as we get older that the experience is different and way more positive than the way it's depicted in the culture. So everywhere my ideas hit, they get this tremendous response, and that energy is coming from the culture. And that's really exciting. I self-published this and am getting, so much pickup because, honestly, it's a good book. It's fun to read. The ideas are clearly expressed, but also people are going like, where has this been? It's really striking a chord that's authentic, that comes from them and the culture, not from me. I live in New York City, and the New York City Department for the Aging is launching an anti-ageism initiative, it's rare for a city agency to do something that's that activism oriented. And it's launching with a conversation between me and the commissioner, because and the United Nations they have an International Day of Older People that launches their year-long initiative. Their campaign is Stop Ageism, and I'm giving the keynote, and I'm thrilled to bits about that. Aging is such a huge field. I mean, that's all of life, but whether you're involved in housing or recreation or education, whatever it is, there's a zillion sites out there about healthy aging. As I see it, if we don't look first and foremost at our own attitudes, and then at the way those attitudes are perpetuated, perhaps in our culture, in our institutions, we're not going to change the issue fundamentally. It's like if you wanted to do education for women, or anything to do with women, wouldn't you think that awareness of sexism would be fundamental to framing the solution in as broad and effective a way as possible? So I want to introduce the issue of systematic discrimination into every aspect of how we plan cities, how we you name it, how we think about aging itself, in our own aging and in society at large, so we can see discrimination where it exists, because it's discrimination, not age, not ability, that is the barrier to participation in life.
When you get to travel around and visit places like the Iowa City Senior Center, you see a place where their goal is to bring people together through talents and interests rather than through age. What do you think when you get a chance to visit a place like this and see kind of the programs that they're running?
I think it's fantastic. Ideally, we wouldn't need senior centers. We would have community centers for all ages, where if you were interested in bird watching or finger painting or learning Snapchat or whatever, people would come together and age would be invisible. That's not the world we live in, at least not yet. So it's fantastic, and I want to point out that I think the age you need to be 55?
50.
50. Mm-hmm. So that's 50 more years of life. That is a huge, huge, huge demographic. One of the many things that drives me nuts are the checklists, often for demographic or shopping purposes, that have 18 to 26 and then 27 to 30. They end at 65, as though everyone over 65 buys the same stuff and does the same things. When when people have 30 more years of life, we would never make the same assumption about a group of people from 30 to 60. And as we age, we grow more different from one another. Right? Think about it. A group of 17-year-olds has a lot more in common than a group of 77-year-olds. So I think it's fantastic that there's a place for people to come and go. I would love to see, come and do that. I mean, the range of stuff here is fantastic. The directors, the people I've met are terrific, and the people who, it didn't surprise me, but they're, super sharp and super interested on stuff. And having a place like this to come and meet other people and do things is fantastic. So in a way, the fact that it's for older people, it's for this enormous range of people who are interested in an enormous range of things. And it's fantastic that they have a place to come and meet each other, because the biggest obstacle to aging well is social isolation. So anything that brings people together is a good thing, and it's fantastic to have this terrific facility.
And they probably told you the invitation to come and speak here was after a member here had read your book. Did you get a chance to meet that member?
I did meet him, yeah.
What did you think?
I'm grateful. He said this book is really important, and I know that it's a broad mandate. It's pretty bold to say we need to change the culture, but if you look at the position of women in American society when I was born, which was 1952, rape culture was, no one had challenged it. You got to pat your secretary on the butt and call her girl, all this. So there were no women chief executives, stuff like that. We have made enormous progress. Consciousness raising and a social movement was the vehicle for that. This change is within our grasp. And it involves all of us, people of all ages. I mean, people think, oh, it's, so great to be 20 or 30. It's hard to be 20 and 30. I mean, your 20s is really hard, especially when you have messages from the culture that, now is your peak life experience. It's downhill from here. So you better, have fantastic sex with someone as perfectly beautiful as you, because of course you are young. Therefore, everything about your life is, idealized. Those messages aren't helpful. They're crippling when you're young. And then, there's this idea that you're going to hit, 30 and 40 and then it's all going to suck. That's crazy. It dampens our aspirations and our sense of self our whole life long. I have a thing in the book, a phrase I appropriated from a geriatrician who called herself an old person in training. And I guess part of my, a central idea is to urge everyone, and the younger you do it, the better, is to acknowledge, it's really simple. Someday, if you're lucky, you'll be old. That older people are not other. They're us. They're just older versions of us. So that instead of buying into this sort of rat race, that if you, eat enough kale or have plastic surgery or hang out with younger people or you'll stay young, which is a terrible goal, you're not going to stay young. You're going to get old. You can deal with that at whatever remove works for you, but instead of spending all this energy pretending it's not going to happen, you form an empathic link to that future self. You look at older people around you. You don't look past them. You look at them, and you see the things that you think, well, I really hope, I don't want to be like that, but I do want to be like that. Or look, we learn, and then we don't have this us-them divide, which doesn't really exist. There is no point at which you wake up old.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ashton. I appreciate it, and best of luck moving forward with the movement.
Thank you so much. I hope you'll be part of it.
Thank you.